Sometimes I wonder, if I lived in the land of Israel 3,000 years ago, who would I be? What would my life be like? Would I be a farmer or a shepherd? Maybe a poet or an artist? How about a soldier or even a king? Sometimes I see a little of myself in all these people. And when I meet Israelis today from all over the country, I see a little of them in these people too. When you picture an Israeli today, who comes to mind? Someone like him or her? Or how about them? And if all these people are so different, what connects them in the story of Israel today? Jews have always lived in the land of Israel since ancient times. Back then, they had kings, a temple in Jerusalem, and armies led by heroic warriors. They grew their own food, raised animals, wrote poetry and songs, and they spoke Hebrew, not only in prayer, but in everyday life. Since then, for almost 2,000 years, most Jews lived in many other countries around the world. They had no army, often couldn't own land, and picked up some of the customs, languages, and cultures of the places they now lived. But wherever they were, they kept their faith and connection to Israel. When Jews started coming back to Israel in modern times, many saw themselves as restoring ancient roles by farming the land, fulfilling biblical mitzvot, commandments, and celebrating holidays that honor the produce of the land and the heroes of old. In many ways, the early pioneers who came back to Israel asked themselves the questions, who would they become here, and how could their new lives connect to the ones once lived in this land? As these pioneers built new Jewish communities where ancient ones once stood, they mixed Jewish traditions from around the world with the culture of Jews who were already living here. Sometimes the meeting of these groups was not so easy. When the modern state of Israel was founded, it didn't have much money or resources. To make things even harder, its population more than doubled in just a few years. Jews from Europe whose wealth had been stolen arrived penniless on Israel's shores. Jews from the Arab world had to leave their wealth behind as they fled. Jews from around the globe began returning to the Jewish homeland. With so many new immigrants arriving all at once, Israel struggled to absorb and support everyone. All these very different groups of Jews, many fleeing for their lives, found safety in Israel, the home of the entire Jewish people. Now imagine idealistic pioneers, refugees with nowhere else to go, and Jewish families who've lived in Israel for countless generations, all suddenly living together in one small, brand new country, fighting to survive. All these Jewish communities living together needed to find a way to connect, not just to each other, but to the Jewish story as a whole. Becoming Israeli and uniting all these different people wasn't simple. That's why in its early years, Israel worked hard to build a new culture that connected modern life in Israel with the ancient Jewish past. One of the most amazing examples of recovering something ancient and making it modern is the Hebrew language itself. When Hebrew started to be used as a spoken language for the first time in almost 2,000 years, people had to wonder, how do we create new Hebrew words to describe things that didn't exist in ancient times? A creative answer was to make ancient words new again, to create or redefine words that drew on ancient sources, to root the modern language in a tradition that has always belonged. The Hebrew word bakbuk, which in ancient times referred to a clay jug, was now used to describe a bottle. If today you ask, "Efshar bakbuk maim," someone will hand you a plastic or glass water bottle, not a clay jug. And the world today runs on electric power. But life wasn't like that thousands of years ago, so how did modern Hebrew find a word for electricity? The Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, uses the word chashmal to describe something bright, shiny, and radiant. So today, if my nephews were to prank me by shutting off the electricity as I record this video, I'd tell you, hayeladim kibu et hachashmal. These days, people text in Hebrew, make memes in Hebrew, and even spray Hebrew graffiti on city walls. Some Hebrew words are thousands of years old. Others were invented or adopted really recently. It's hard to think of any other time in history this has happened. A spoken language once nearly forgotten, now alive again. Like Hebrew, Israeli identity itself was made modern by rooting it in something very old, from a time before the Jewish exile when different tribes saw themselves as one people, an extended family. When Jews from all over the world started rebuilding Jewish communities in the land of Israel, they drew on memories of the Jewish past to create something inspiring and new. The new Israeli Jew would be strong and modern. able to work the land and build a thriving democratic country. Native-born Israelis started identifying as sabras, named for the prickly pear cactus found in Israel, which are resilient and tough on the outside, capable of thriving in challenging environments, but also soft and sweet on the inside. As this new identity developed and as the decades progressed, Jews from all around the world continued moving to Israel, speaking different languages, cooking different foods, and representing different ways of life. Sabras, alongside Jews from Lithuania, Yemen, Russia, Poland, Germany, Iraq, Ethiopia, France, you can imagine they didn't always understand or appreciate each other. They argued over a lot, as Jewish people tend to do. They each had different ideas of what being Jewish looked like, and they imagined slightly different visions for what the Jewish state should become. But more importantly than what made them different, they recognized that, squabbles and all, they were part of one big, diverse Jewish family. And even though they had disagreements, they all ultimately shared the same hope, Liot am chofshi be'artzenu, to be a free nation in the Jewish homeland, the land of Israel, to build a strong and safe home for all the people living there, and for Jewish people wherever they lived. Today, Jewish families from around the world continue to move to Israel to make Aliyah, each adding something unique that helps shape the country. And while people hold on to their heritage and unique identities, most simply think of themselves as Israeli. Israel is now home to the largest and most diverse Jewish communities in the world. One of the country's greatest achievements has been bringing all these communities together again, not just in spirit, but in one place. From the very beginning, Israel promised in its Declaration of Independence to give freedom and equal rights to all its citizens, regardless of race or religion. Israel's non-Jewish minorities have created beautiful lives for themselves and their families as full citizens of the country. They vote and are elected into politics. They sit as judges in Israel's highest courts. They work in every professional field, and they freely practice their religions, whether they are Christian, Muslim, Samaritan, Druze, or Baha'i. Israel is home to people of many faiths. It's one of the few places in the Middle East where the freedom of religion is afforded to everyone. But living as a non-Jewish citizen in a Jewish state can sometimes be hard, just like being a minority can be hard in any country. Israel's national symbols are Jewish. The week runs on Jewish time, and Jews from anywhere in the world are especially warmly welcomed when they make Aliyah. Israel's Arab citizens in particular, regardless of their religion, have sometimes faced unfair treatment. And still, Israel maintains two key commitments as a Jewish and democratic state: being the homeland of Jews everywhere, whether they are citizens of Israel or not, and being a safe home for all its citizens, whether they are Jewish or not. And Israel keeps working to make that home stronger for everyone. Israelis come from different places and have different traditions, languages, and ways of life. Most are Jewish, but about a quarter are not. Not every Jewish Israeli is religious, and not every religious Israeli is Jewish. So how can one country have so many different kinds of people and still feel united? What connects them, all as Israelis? Jews have always been among the people living here, and as more arrived from around the world, Israel had to weave their stories together with Jewish and non-Jewish citizens who have, for generations, called this land home. That meant finding a new Israeli identity, one that could hold many different people inside a single story, a modern identity connected to a time before Jews were scattered, one rooted in a story that was written and sustained here, in this land, since ancient times. And still, I wonder, if I lived here thousands of years ago, who would I be? Who would I want to become? What would have connected me to everyone else around me? When I think of life then and when I think of life now, I don't have all the answers. But I imagine that connecting all these people are a few things that were true then and are still true now. Just as in ancient times when different families and tribes saw themselves as part of one people, modern Israelis also found a way to weave themselves into a single story. Israelis from all walks of life are part of one extended family who dreamt of a shared home, share a common spirit resilient and strong, and are doing their part to build a shared future together. Israel's story isn't finished, it's still being written. And if you feel connected to it, as I do, then you're an important part of that story too, and you might even help to write the next chapter.